Welcome to Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back, and thank you for joining us in this episode.
Hello, my name is Patrick, and I'm Frack.
Hello, my name is Jeff, and I'm Frick. Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back is a show where we will discuss different aspects of fandom and how they relate to the gospel. Currently, we're going through the Prime Video series Invincible and connecting lessons from each episode to teachings of the Bible. Now, just as many of you are, we are also fans of other things as well. So with this episode, we will conclude Invincible, and we will announce at the end of this episode where we're going next. And we got the name of the show from our father, who dubbed us Frick and Frack since we were kids.
So the title of this episode is Where I Really Come From. All right, and so we start the episode with a mortal's dead body falling to the ground while Omni-Man says to Mark that we need to talk. Mark attacks his dad, and he thinks he's being mind-controlled. Omni-Man tells him the truth about the Viltrumite Empire. They are a warrior society, and that they are a conquering empire. And Omni-Man has been sent to planet Earth to weaken it so it can be conquered and join the Viltrum Empire. Omni-Man tells him that they can live for thousands of years and won't miss the people on Earth for very long. After Omni-Man explains that he loves Debbie like a pet, Mark starts the fight between them. The Guardians, with the arrival of Adam and Eve, prepare to be called in if necessary. Invincible and Omni-Man continue their fight with some interference from the military, but no success. Invincible saves a fighter pilot from his fallen aircraft, and Omni-Man kills him in front of Mark. Omni-Man punches Mark so hard that he lands in Chicago and has a trail of debris that causes massive damage to the city, killing a lot of people. Mark gets up and tries to stop a building from collapsing, but fails. And as he holds a dead body, Omni-Man says that all human life is pointless in the grand scheme of things, even Mark's mother's. Omni-Man punches him into the subway and uses Mark's body to slaughter the people on the train. Omni-Man continues his disdain for the people of Earth as he pummels Mark. The Guardians gear up so they can at least go out and save lives. And Omni-Man and Invincible's fight takes them to the mountains that causes an avalanche. Omni-Man lays into Mark in the mountain, and as he's doing that, flashes back to when Mark plays Little League. And that memory stops him from killing Mark. The fight ends with Mark explaining that he's fighting because that even after 500 years from now, the two of them would still have each other. With that, Omni-Man leaves Earth and the solar system. Cecil and Debbie arrive to take Mark to the hospital. The Maulers get arrested, and others watch as the Guardians start clearing the debris in Chicago. Mark awakens in the hospital with his mother caring for him and telling him how proud of him she is. Debbie leaves and runs into Cecil and tells her that they will be taken care of financially because of his guilt for not knowing about Omni-Man's treachery. The Guardians return to their headquarters, and Rex cleans off the bloodstain left by Nolan's attack at the beginning of the series. And everyone starts returning to a semblance of normalcy as Mark recovers in the hospital. William and Eve run into each other at the Grayson house, finding out that they both know Mark is invincible. Cecil talks to Mark about life post-Omni-Man and takes him to the White Room where scientists are working on different inventions. He wants Mark to take Omni-Man's place, but Mark declines for now. And Cecil takes Mark and Debbie home. Mark thinks of the conversation with his dad about being a hero like him and finds his mother hysterical in her room. Amber comes over and they reunite. And then William and Eve come along with Mark and Amber as they hang out. And Debbie goes to Art's. Eve explains that she's Adam Eve, and Mark is called away to intercept someone traveling to Earth through space. And it's Alan the alien. Alan explains that Earth is off limits because there's a Viltrumite living on the planet. Mark explains what happened, and Alan explains the coalition of planets fight against the Viltrumites. And at the end of this episode, we get teases of the villains still out there and things that can be coming in the next seasons of Invincible. So this we didn't really talk about this before doing the synopsis for this episode. This episode is extremely violent. Now, if you've been watching the Invincible series, you have seen that they have not ever shied away from blood and gore and things like that. Even the comic book is the same way. Like, it is very much the comic book is at least a very strong PG-13, especially in the beginning. When it gets later, it's pretty much R, I would say.
I would agree. Yeah, the comic definitely takes an adult turn. In the beginning, it's not as bad. Like, there's still blood and gore in the series, but as the series progresses, it ramps up. As did the season. The season it definitely ramped up. They got progressively. Well, I don't know if there was. I think the blood and gore throughout the entire this first season pretty much stayed pretty level throughout, don't you think? Until this episode.
Yeah, this one took it up to 11, and it was about 8 or it was about a 7 or 8 for the rest of the series.
And that's not.
There's the language too.
Yeah, and well, that's but the language has been throughout the season.
Absolutely,
as well.
Especially
so
when
it's
Rex
not
talks.
yeah, so it's not that big of a shocker. If you've been watching the series, yes, there is a language, there is violence, and there's things that could be potentially very traumatic to watch. And so one of the things that I really liked about the showing about in this episode was the action. Like, the action was like 100% top notch. Some of the best animation action you can get around when it comes to just flat out superhero action. And I liked that because in the comic, this fight didn't last this long. It wasn't as elaborate in the comic. So I liked how much more they built on it. They built on Nolan and his appeal to Mark to try and convince him to join him. It's just absolutely fantastic action. And like, you really. So this is a bit of a minor spoiler. But again, this is only if they do this in the series. It's a spoiler. I don't know if they will or not. So one of my favorite issues of Invincible, it would take place down the road in the series. There's a guy that winds up going after Mark, and I think he has like either has like some like a form of like tech gadget weapons and something like electric based, I think a little bit too, and fights Mark. The motivation for him is that he's upset at Mark and Nolan because their world-shattering fight in the beginning of the comic book series, one of the people that was a casualty of that was his sister. And so it just absolutely infuriated him. And it was one of the first times that I've read quite a few comic books. And I will be the first one to tell you that I have by far only read like, based on how many superhero comic books are, I've read a small portion of them. I had never before that time had ever read a comic that actually dealt with the people that suffered these huge fights, in which these happen all the time in comic books. You see these all the time. You see, these teams, like the Avengers going against the X-Men, or Avengers versus Avengers, going up against
like Korvac,
Hydra, the Legion, like the Justice League going up against the Legion of Doom, the Sinestro Corps invading Earth, the Black Lantern, the Blackest Night going on. You see all this stuff, and so it's like for that, what was so great about that Invincible issue is that it brought to light, like, sometimes we get kind of stuck in, people get stuck in these people's worlds, and it's like we don't get to see how much, we don't always get to always get that fully thought out about how much damage a superhero society would do to us.
Right.
And so
it's one of the reasons why I love Astro City.
Yeah, and I had never heard. I hadn't honestly. By the time I read this issue, I probably still hadn't even heard of Astro City, but
Probably.
it was an eye opener for me. That's what I loved about that issue so much, was that it was truly unique in that way, is that it dealt with these huge fights and how much, you know, superhero society can suck for people.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so it's just, you know, like, and so I say all this to say, what I loved about how they expanded the fight is that we get to see how that, you know, if they decide to tackle this in the coming seasons, they've already set the stage, because we have seen how traumatic this fight was between Nolan and Mark, especially when they got to Chicago. Oh my goodness, just like the rampage that happened. And so, but yeah, it was, oh my gosh, it was absolutely fantastic. And if I ever get to meet Ryan Otley again, I need to try and remember to ask him, it's like, so how badly do you want to draw that train scene? Because they didn't do in the comic, they didn't do the train scene. And we all know what train scene we're talking about, you know, Nolan holding Mark and just having the train run right through him, or them run through right through the train. And Ryan Otley he wasn't the original artist on the series, but he is the main artist because he took over after like issue 7 or something like that. He took over the full-time artistic duties. But yeah, so I don't know what specific number it is. It's very early in the series that he took over. But yeah, so I just kind of want to know, it's like, so how badly you want to draw that train scene? Because again, it's just, you know, Invincible's, you know, like it's like one of his children. Just like how much time and energy he invested in the series. So yeah, that's just kind of what I feel like, you know, like that the action was just top notch in this, and you know, and I love the expounding on it, and the fact that, you know, and Mark being true to his nature so far in the series, is that like, yeah, you know, so yes, I know I'm fighting for my survival, but that doesn't justify me just forgetting everybody around me. I need to still try and save people. And then him failing quite miserably, in fact. And, you know, it's just like,
and that's one of the more consistent things with Mark in this season, is that, and we've touched on this throughout the show, that Mark isn't exactly an effective superhero, unlike his comic book counterpart, or the comic book Mark. You know, he did great from the get-go, and basically until he has to fight his dad. And so then but in this show, he had a few minor successes, except for the montage episode where he starts taking on a bunch of nobodies, and they did that to show how he's grown as a hero, and starts feeding his ego a little bit, because he's like, oh man, I'm invincible. And so this is then basically leading up to this episode is him realizing that he's actually not as good as he thinks he is, because it starts with Titan. You know, Titan's the one who helps him basically realize he's not as good of a hero as he thinks he is, and then it's just kind of downhill from there, because he has a hard time against the Reaniman, and then, you know, he's like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this, and so the doubt, and so the doubt that Mark has is actually fairly true to the character, because he doubts being a hero from time to time. It's definitely not as early as it is in the show. But he does struggle with it later.
Yeah, very early in the comic, he's full bore into being a superhero, and even with everything that happens with his dad, because I'm pretty sure we brought this up in the previous episodes of ours, when we talk about Invincible. Cecil doesn't in the comics, Cecil doesn't show up until after the fight, after this fight. This is in the comics when we would actually meet Cecil. Um, so, and in the true to the comics, Cecil does offer Invincible the job. Because in the comics, uh, Mark and Debbie knew that Nolan used an earpiece, so he actually did work directly with Cecil in the comics. So it wasn't like how it is in the show, where it's like, no, I just kind of do my own thing, and we have a mutual understanding of each other or whatever.
Right.
No,
Well,
in the comics, he worked directly for him. He had an earpiece,
right.
and
And well, he responds to Cecil from time to time, like, because I remember in the one of the episodes he talks about how busy he is because the Guardians of the Globe are
right. Well,
awful.
right. So he
He's
does
picking up the slack.
So Cecil has his number and can give him a call and say, "Hey, can you help us with this?" But it's a different relationship than the comics. In the comics, it's,
Yeah.
"Hey, we need you here. Hey, we need you here. Come." Have the direct earpiece and connection, and in which that's actually what the relationship turned into for Mark in the comics, as well as that he got the earpiece and the beeper. Although in the comics at that point, beepers were kind of, they were on their way out. They weren't
Right.
completely gone. Beepers weren't completely gone by then, but
Yeah.
they were on their way out.
Right.
And
Because
for those of
the
you that are maybe really young and don't know what a beeper is, it was the first version of the cell phone, that or the common version of the cell phone, because
yeah.
you could send, quick messages to people through you would call their beeper number, and you could send like a very quick message or whatever. So
Usually
yeah,
you would send your phone number so that they needed to call you back.
yeah, and so yeah. So yeah, anyways, that's
The only people and one of the jokes throughout pop culture in the last few years is that there's only two kinds of people that still use beepers: drug dealers and doctors.
yeah.
Um,
And so that was actually one of the jokes with the comic book, was that they assumed that because by this time Amber still didn't know that Mark was invincible, so she thought Mark was a drug dealer because he'd always be getting these like beeper messages,
and he had to run
and
off and disappear for
he'd
a long
run off and
time.
go somewhere, and by this time even William had known who knew that Mark was invincible, and so they just kind of started laughing. But anyway, so yeah, it's one of the slight, it's one of the differences and deviations from the comic and the series. um but yeah, so it's funny to think about beepers, and I actually haven't thought about beepers in, who knows how long.
Uh,
uh
I
but
have
yeah,
used a beeper because I had it for when I was a chaplain in the hospital, so that was always fun carrying those things around.
I've
Um,
never used a beeper. I've
well,
called people that, our one of our best friends in high school. He was notorious for a beeper, so we would always communicate with him that
yeah.
way.
Um, I think one of my favorite moments in this episode is when Nolan has his flashback to Mark's Little League game. And in the episode, in the flashback, you see Nolan sitting or standing away from everyone. And he's just upset. He's like, this is a waste of my time. This is just so dumb. And he's like, I was like, and Debbie's like, well, come and sit with me and watch. It's like, well, if you want me to watch, I mean, I should be watching from the sky. I'd have a better view. And she's like, that's not the point. And lays it out. And during that, like, Mark gets two strikes, and then on the third pitch, he hits the ball and does an in the park home run. And during all of that, Nolan finally, this is the first time Nolan really probably gets a chink in his Viltrumite armor and becoming more compassionate, because he's like, oh, this is what it means to be a dad. This is what it means to have a son. And I mean, I totally get that. Like, I see that that look, and he's just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I mean, I mean, it's little league, and it's just, and it's probably the type of little league that, my kids still play, that where everyone gets a chance to bat and those kind of things.
And even if you do strike out, you still go on base.
Yeah, you probably would have hit off the tee or something like that. I don't know. Because you can't really, it's kind of hard to tell how old Mark is at that point, but it's underhanded pitching. So anyways, I just had a moment like that recently with my son. So my oldest can read. And so what, my son is my second oldest, and he was reading me a Spider-Man story and was doing a fantastic job. And because he's just growing as a reader, and so it's major props to my wife, because she homeschools the kids and is teaching him, and so she's had the most direct teaching him and his reading. And I just was getting all teary-eyed and choked up. Like, I was keeping it in because I didn't want to freak him out. But he was just reading, and I'm so proud of him. And so I see that, like, my kid's doing great stuff. My third child, she had her dance recital. She actually did the dance. It was great because she actually participated this time. And so it's
For
just
those of you that don't know, in her previous dance recital, she just stood there.
Oh yeah, she looked like, what the heck is going on? What are you crazy people doing? She was in proper dance position. It was actually, it was good. That was good posture and hand placement. But she's like, I'm not doing this. And then she, at one point in the dance recital, she does start moving her arms at one point to start doing. Then she's like, nope, I'm not doing it. And so anyways,
but this time she actually did dance.
And this time she actually danced, and I was very happy about that. So anyway, so but I just really connected with that. And honestly, even though I've seen this episode before, I had forgotten about this scene in this episode. And so it took me by surprise. Like I said, I had forgotten that it was in it. And so it was good to see it again.
Yeah, it was a very contrasting moment for me, just because I also watched The Boys, and which is also a very graphic show. It's very entertaining. It has some great. It's a more cynical take on what the superhero world would be like and how superheroes would act. But I do want to warn you, there is language and there is gore as well. So if you do decide to check it out, just be forewarned. So as I've been rewatching The Boys, there's an episode where the Superman archetype character, his name is Homelander, and he is not a nice person. He's kind of like Omni-Man in that there's some deep down evil.
Worse than Omni-Man. My understanding.
I don't want to go into it too much because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody that if they decide to go out and check The Boys, I don't want to ruin anything. But there's a scene in which he is training his son and trying to teach him how to fly. And the son does not want to do it because he does not believe he can fly and does not believe he has powers. And Homelander's just like, no, you'll be okay, and shoves him off a roof. And it's only, he qualifies. It's only like 20 feet up. He's fine. And at one point, the mother of the child is saying, like, he's not breathing. But he does eventually start breathing. He does turn out to be fine, but it's still just kind of like you go from, I literally like watched this like maybe a day or two ago, and then I watched the Invincible episode earlier today, and I see Nolan be excited for his child and succeeding at something, and when you see Homelander push his child off a roof.
Yeah.
But then again, you also see Omni-Man just literally knock the teeth out of his son.
Yeah.
So, uh, so yeah, it was. Let me tell you that Viltrumite regeneration is a great thing because Mark's gotten knocked around quite a bit in this first season, and the fact that his teeth, like he's lost his teeth a couple times, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, honestly, it could be surgical implants.
That's true too, but more than like my money's on regeneration.
Could be.
But yeah, so so yeah, so not a good day for Superman archetype dads out there. Um, but yeah, so one of my, honestly, and I'm so happy this scene made it into the series, and it's the White Room. Like, and again,
Mhm.
like I said before, this is the point in the comics when we actually meet Cecil for the first time. And let me also say this too. One of the things that just absolutely cracks me up every time they show a sign of the Pentagon and it says parking in the rear. I don't know why, but they always put that in there in the comic. I don't know if
Mhm.
that's actually where I don't know if that's actually what the sign for the Pentagon looks like. I need to look that up. Um,
I will do it right now.
so while he's doing that, I'm going to explain. So in the comic, every time that they have their lead-in scene that they're doing something with the global defense or they're meeting with the whatever, they always in the comic book they always had a panel of the Pentagon and it has a sign that says Pentagon parking in rear. And so the fact that they do that in the show too, I absolutely love that. It shows that the people that are making the series love the comic, so they include those little things in there. And then one of my favorite early scenes in the comic, when we get to meet Cecil, he brings Mark into a room, and in the comic, it's all white, like you don't know what's going on, like it's just Mark and Cecil standing there, and Mark is kind of freaking out, like, um, what's happening? There's nothing here. I don't see anything. And he's like, oh, my bad. And he, like with a, he tells him, turns the lights off or something like that. I don't remember exactly the exact terminology, but he says lights. And so then Mark is able to see everything. Like he sees all this different stuff that the Global Defense Agency is working on. And it's just like, and what I love about it too is that it's playing into like different version, like different things that like different conspiracy theories out there, like or not necessarily just different conspiracy theories, but like some proven things that the government does to people. And it's just like, oh yeah, it's like what you drink from your tap water, yeah, it prevents you from seeing in this spectrum, and that's all we use in here, so that's why you can't see anything. And it's just like, that's some shady stuff that I totally believe the government could do or would do. It's just like, yeah, the things you drink that you're trying to make yourself healthy, yeah, we do that so you can't see this stuff. Um, and so it makes you wonder if that's not maybe like the camouflage technology that, like, at the end of this episode, you see the Mahler twins get picked up by the Global Defense Agency employ soldiers or agents or whatever, and they decloak, and it makes you wonder if like maybe that's what they're using to actually cloak themselves, is that they use that, and then when they make their appearances, when them turn that off or whatever. Uh, I don't know. It's just a theory. But it might be a completely different cloaking technology. But I do absolutely 100% love that scene. Have you been able to find if the yeah, more than likely that's just them doing something jokey. We'll keep looking into it later. Um,
I'm not able to find anything, at least just the couple minutes of Google searching. Um, so yeah, I love the White Room too. I think it's a fascinating thing, and potentially with where things could be going, depending on how true they are to the comics, the White Room will be uh, important. And Cecil kind of teases that a little bit in this episode about what it all is in the White Room.
well, I mean, in all honesty, what it boils down to, and they've been talking about this throughout the season, is how do you take down a Viltrumite? And speaking of taking down a Viltrumite, it's one of the things that I liked about when he meets up with Alan again. And this was also, like they're when they in the comics, this is that actually is what happens, is that after he's recovered, at some point Alan does come and they have a powwow on the moon again, And he explains, it's like, oh yeah, dude, I wasn't supposed to even come to Earth. Like that plan's been flagged for Viltrum. And it's like, man, I wish I had realized what was going on, and then I could have warned you. And he's just like, dude, you have no idea. It's like, you would have told me, but honestly, I would have just gone talk to my dad, and he probably would have fed me a line, and he would have lied, and I would have bought it. So anyways, really love that interaction. But it also, when Mark was talking with Alan, it sets up a lot of future enemies that are going to pop up, and if as as much as they're going to stay true to the comic as with the show as they will, because they've been pretty faithful so far. So I only assume they're going to stay. I do expect changes, but I expect them to stay pretty faithful. But when they tease the Viltrumites coming, so that's kind of like there's a couple Viltrumites coming to Earth that it's gonna be rough. I don't know if we saw the I don't remember if they showed the female one, but they did show the big guy.
Yeah, they did.
And so yeah. Oh my gosh. When he showed
Arisia?
up.
Is it Arisia?
Her name is Anissa.
Anissa, that's what it was.
Arisia is a Green Lantern.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Too many comics in my brain.
But yeah, well, sorry, spoiler. Anissa is the name of the female Viltrumite, so we might as well go and say the big guy, Conquest. Ooh, some stuff is coming.
Yeah, that's gonna. Yeah.
So, but yeah, you do see him when they kind of show, like when Nolan is explaining the history. There's this like really jacked dude that has white hair. That's Conquest.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, there was at one point a fan casting. Unfortunately, it wouldn't work now. But there was a fan casting that they wanted Gilbert Gottfried to voice Conquest, and I do think that'd be pretty funny because Conquest is a bad dude, and you have this high squeaky voice voicing him. I think it'd be funny. I wouldn't want it, but
if it hadn't happened, J.K. Simmons would be a really great Conquest. He's also a great Omni-Man.
Well, I'm sure they'll knock it out of the park. So far, they've just really knocked it out of the park, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the voice actors. And we've talked about this quite a bit already. But yeah, they've really knocked it out of there so far. And it's like, and just really one of the things that I truly do like about this show over the comic is Debbie. And like, she's more normal. She's a real. And as much as there's a part of me that really liked the fact that everybody was 100% shocked that Omni-Man was not who he said he was, I do like the slow build of like Debbie and Cecil figuring it out, kind of like. But I like the explanation as to why they didn't go as far as they did earlier in the season, is because they were like, we've built trust with him for 20 years. And so maybe we're just not seeing something, it's like just holding out hope that maybe he's mind controlled or he's blackmailed or something along those lines, and just holding out hope that whatever the reason he did it, there's an actual good reason for it. And so, and I like that. And then on top of it too, like I loved seeing Debbie with Mark as the first time he gains kind of consciousness after the fight, and you can kind of tell she's powering through that conversation. Like, it's a very quick conversation. She powers through when she's telling him, "I'm proud of you." It's like, I know you got your butt kicked. She didn't say that. You obviously shouldn't say that, but it's like, she's like, I know you got your butt kicked, but you stood up to him and you did the right thing. You acted how I raised you to, and but it still breaks her heart because it's she fell in love with him, like she's, and in fact, but you see by the end of the episode she's still in love with him,
Yep.
and it's her husband and the father of her child, and so it's like, um but she's still so proud of him, and it's like, so there's an aspect of that I just really loved, um about that, and it was just it was a really touching moment. And in fact, I didn't quite remember it being so powerful the first time I watched it, so rewatching it now, it's kind of like, oh wow, this was really good. And like, and the dialogue back and forth between Nolan and Mark was just absolutely top notch. Like, man, did J.K. Simmons and Stephen Yeun really bring it, um and their delivery. Like, you could just feel, you could feel Mark's heart breaking when, as the more and more he figures out what his father's really like. And so
Right.
it
And
just,
especially when he refers to Debbie as a pet. Like that was tough to read in the comic, but having that said by J.K. Simmons, I was like, wow. An incredible line of dialogue that he gave, and on top of it, you know, you could even I'm trying to decide if there's any doubt in what he was saying. Like, I'm trying to remember the scene, even though just watched it this afternoon. Uh, if there's any doubt there, because in the comic, I mean, Omni Man's just a straight up sociopath during this part. Like, he's just cold. He's like, I'm right. At least that's the way I always read it, was that there was no give until Mark said something like, even now, even during this part, I feel like J.K. Simmons was giving this great emotional depth to Omni Man that wasn't necessarily, you can't always act out in a comic.
well, the phrasing, what eventually stopped Omni Man in the comic fight is actually what Mark said to Nolan in the show, and that is like, we would
Absolutely.
have had each other, and so it's just kind of, like, when Nolan's laying out, it's like, dude, you're gonna live thousands of years. What are you gonna have in 500? It's like, none of these people that you say you care about are gonna even exist. You may not even remember them. And he's like, we would have had each other.
Yeah.
And so it's just, so yeah, it's very emotional, very, like, just really, really tugged at you, um and just really great stuff. And I don't know if the creators of the show realize, and this is just how special of a place the internet can be, but like, there's at least two or three really popular meme styles that came
Mhm.
out from this episode.
Yeah.
You know,
The
that's the most popular one. I want to get to that, so just give me a second. So the two less popular versions of it are, um, like, holding somebody, being like, like, generally the way that I would kind of see this meme is just like, oh, and hey, by the way, oh, you say you're a fan of this fandom, you're a
Lord of
part
the
of this
Rings,
fandom, what's that?
like Lord of the Rings.
Like Lord of the Rings is like, oh, so here's all of this information, and so, like, you see, like Similarian and all the sorts of stuff being said as you get, and then just being plowed through because you say you're a fan. um
Mhm.
and then the other one, the second most popular one, or so that's the third most popular meme that I've seen that come out from this episode. And again, these are very tragic scenarios that are happening, and people went to town and did some fantastic stuff with it. And so then the second most popular one is just like, do you see what they have to do to, like, to just get a fraction of our power? My favorite one actually is the cargo shorts version, where they talk about, like, talks about, like, this is a very common thing. If I'm sure people have heard, but like, one of the things that's very common, that I've heard complaints from women, is that their clothes don't have pockets. They don't have pockets for anything. Like, even jeans that they wear, they have things that look like pockets, but they're not actually pockets. They can't put anything in there. Anyways, and so then it's like, I think they show like, like my favorite version of the meme is like the fighter jets are replaced with a purse, and then Omni-Man is replaced with like cargo shorts, and it's like, do you see what they have to do to just mimic a fraction of our power? And the fact that we have cargo shorts, where their complaint is they have no pockets and we have too many pockets.
Yeah. Well, and that's where women will joke that if they have their men or guy wearing cargo shorts, that they are their walking purse, so they don't
Right.
have to have a purse. And I will not lie, when I had cargo shorts, I do not anymore. When I did act as a purse for my wife. Like she'd be like, "Hey, can you carry this?" I was like, "Yes, absolutely," because I had space um, for whatever little stuff that she had. I didn't do it very often because she, you know, didn't do that kind of stuff very often. But from time to time, she'd be like, "Hey, can you carry my keys?" And I'd be like, "Sure," and I'd carry her keys for her, things like that.
and and then obviously the most popular meme is at the very near the very end of the fight, and Nolan is you can't, you obviously with the audio you can't see it, but it's like when he points at it, it's like, do you like think, Mark? And so like bringing up some point, it's just like, just something that is like, if you genuinely thought about it, and so again, these are very emotional things happening right now. Mark is just seeing people die left and right, and people are making jokes about it, and it's like, but it's great. It's just really comical. It's just I kind of wonder if when they were making this stuff, like, did you think memes were going to pop up because of it? Honestly, I think that's actually the ultimate sign of respect, is that they take something and turn it into a meme.
Mm.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of a
Well,
reverse
maybe
effect for Morbius.
yeah. I haven't watched Morbius, and I'm not in a rush to.
I don't plan on it. Uh,
But yeah, and so the last thing I want to talk about just real quick is Alan reappearing, and so I've been um I've never been a huge Seth Rogen fan. I've always liked him. Like, I think he's funny in bits, and not like the stuff that where he's the lead character and that sort of stuff. I tend not to like too much.
Same.
But when he shows up in these little bit things, I do find him funny. Um, but him as Alan the Alien, I absolutely love. I didn't know I needed Seth Rogen as Alan the Alien, but I need Seth Rogen as Alan the Alien.
Absolutely.
Um, so one of my favorite little things, little tidbits that I got, I believe I got this information actually from Ryan Otley. Um, but at the very end of, when everything's getting set up for season two, Alan asks Mark, "Well, what's next for you?" And Mark is like, "Well, I don't know. I finished high school." And Alan's like, "Oh, cool." And then the screen kind of goes black, and you hear Alan say, "What's high school?" 100% improvised line. That was not in the script. Seth Rogen improvised that because, again, that's actually a very good question. It's like, how's Alan supposed to know what the heck high school is? He just spoke earlier that he grew up in a breeding camp because his race was on the verge of extinction. He didn't know who
Yeah.
his father was. Um, but yeah, absolutely love that line because it 100% totally makes sense. Like, Mark just says like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to finish high school." Like, everybody should know what high school is.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely love that line. And the fact that it was improvised is just a little cherry on the top for me.
Wholeheartedly agree. Same for me about Seth Rogen, that I was like, when he was cast, I was like, I can get behind that. And then when I finally did hear it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is Alan the Alien. It's great. I read the comic now. I hear Alan the Alien. I'm trying to think if there's another person that I kind of think of, but I can't. Who actually I hear sometimes is the guy who played Robin in the Batman the Animated Series. I actually hear kind of like Alan actually having a higher voice than Seth Rogen sometimes when I read Invincible, but that's just me. But anyways, but Seth Rogen is perfect as Alan. Yeah.
All right, so our biblical theme for this episode you find from Luke chapter 12, verse 2. There's nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. And so I think it's a very poignant verse for this episode, because now the whole world is, they may not know the finer details, but they know Omni-Man and Invincible, something happened. And then on top of it too, the people closest to the situation got to find out the truth about Omni-Man. They see what happened, what he believed, and that sort of stuff. And so it's just something that's very important, that I feel like one of the things that I feel like happens a lot when it comes to the sin in our life, because this is what that's what being referenced here in this verse is, in all honesty, your sin's going to be made known one way or the other. So more often than you want to believe, your sin's going to get revealed on this earth, like in your lifetime, and it's going to get people know about your sin. If not, if nobody finds out about what your sin is or anything like that, it's going to be revealed to you in heaven. It's going to be revealed in judgment. That's why it's so important for us to be clothed in Christ, is that all of those sins that people don't know about, or that you've kept yourself, can be covered with the blood of Christ. But it's one of the things that I think is so important for us to realize, is that a lot of times when it comes to our sin, we struggle in silence. We struggle in fear of being recognized or being acknowledged as to what's going on. We don't think that people will understand, that people will be compassionate about it. But it'll come to light. And so, and it's not even, and this is also true when it comes to just not with sin, but other stuff too. It's just like, if you're keeping stuff hidden, more than likely at some point it's going to come to light. And, and so I just, one of the things that I strongly encourage people when I mentor people and I talk to people and I encourage people in my life, I try and tell people, it's just like, there's a lot of times people will say stuff behind people's backs, and they get really nervous. They'll be like, "Oh, don't tell them I said this," and stuff like that. And it's just like, well, it's like, it's like, I'm not going to tell somebody what you said about them. I'm just not going to do that. But it's like, you want to know the best 100% foolproof way to know stuff that you say about people behind their backs, is just don't say it. Um, because more than likely, in some form or another, some of that stuff's going to get kind of brought back around. And if you don't want to be like, oh my gosh, do they know what I've said about them or what I think about them? If you want to know how you can make sure that never happens again, like I said, just don't say it. Don't tell people, don't say stuff about people that you wouldn't say to their face. And although I will want caution as well, don't necessarily say something just to say, like, okay, I would say this to your face. Like, okay, but should you say that to their face? Is also something that you need to run through your filter. And so, but anyway, so I just want to strongly encourage you guys, especially, like, I know this is something that's so hard for people sometimes. And, it's just like, oh, it's like, I need to get this off my chest, or I need to tell you something, but don't tell them I said this, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, again, live a life of integrity and character, and that this is like, I'm only going to say something about somebody that I know I would say to them. So if it does get back to them, then it's just like, yeah, that's exactly what I believe about you. Like, I do think you're, like, you have an issue with, I don't know, it's an issue with authority or whatever. So yeah, it's just something that I think is very important for us to understand, is that things you're going to try, people are going to try and keep things hidden. They're going to come to light.
Yeah. And And so, this whole season of Invincible is centered around the mystery of why the Guardians of the Globe were murdered and what was, and then on top of that, what was Omni-Man's reason for doing this? And so, what was the reason? What was causing it? And so then from there, they kind of go into, everything and things like that. And so, Nolan finally reveals, well, this is why I did this. And, um, working in ministry and working with people who, um, sinned. Everyone sinned, everyone's made mistakes, made bad choices, and it you know it will, people will find this stuff out, especially if you live like in a small town. Everybody's gonna know everything. But one of the things that I learned lessons in, growing up, my brother and I's age, we have grown up at the age where social media has become very prevalent in everyone's life. And uh, one of the things that I did learn and discover was that if you put something out on the internet, that is for the whole world to know. It could be technically behind a private account. It could be about, you might have some form of security, something like that. It doesn't matter. Once it's out there on the internet, you just might as well assume that everyone knows what you wrote, even if it's hidden and only for you or something like that, whatever it might be. And so along those lines, what Jeff was saying earlier about, you know, if you're going to put this out there, is it going to be something that you want revealed to everyone? Because there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed or hidden that will not be made known. Because you might, and I'm going to go like very, very unlikely, keep something hidden, but ultimately God knows. And that's something for each of us to consider, that with whatever it is that we're doing, God knows everything. And so we can't conceal anything from God. God knows. And even though God knows, he still loves us. So that's really important that I'm going to pass along to y'all listening now, is God knows and he still loves you. And so even though we cannot hide, that's fine. God's still going to love you anyways. And it's important for each of us to receive that love and let God's love shape us to be more like him, so that when we come across people who have done wrong to us, who have hidden things from us, that we will respond in the same way, with grace, mercy, and compassion, and not, shove them through a subway train. All right, Frick. How would you rate this episode?
It's a 5, not even a question. Like, it does a great job of pulling on the heartstrings. It sets up season 2 beautifully, and it also it just nails the comic. Like, it just does such a great job of nailing the comic and adapting it. And in all honesty, that's for this entire season. Yeah, there was an episode, I think I dropped one episode down to 3 just because it's kind of like meh. But as a whole, the season is a 5. Like, just absolutely phenomenal stuff. Great cast, great story, great adaptation. It's not panel for panel, which you shouldn't go into any comic book movie or adaptation expecting a panel for panel remake. Um, but this was really phenomenal. Like, just absolutely great finish to the story. Um, and like I said, I'm super pumped for what they're going to do in the future.
Well, I'm going to give it a 5 as well. I mean, this is great, and other things that we've talked about is seeing uh, the devastation of these big fights, and and things that Jeff talked about. Like, one of the reasons why Astro City is my favorite comic book series of all time is that it lets you see what real life people have to deal with in a superhuman society. And it's why I love Astro City. It's like I said, it's my favorite series. There's other comic book series that you can look at. There's Damage Control. Let's see, what are some other ones. Anyways, there's lots there's some other ones. You don't get splashes of it from one episode or one issue or for another. There's a Blue Beetle issue where you get to see the eyes through a low level henchman and what they go through and things like that. And so anyway, so it's really good to see that there are consequences to these giant battles, and it's very true to form. It's honestly, it's probably even still slightly downplayed what would actually happen if these fights were real. But anyways, so this, I mean, it's just great, and I wholeheartedly agree. Like, this first season is a 5, and we knocked a couple episodes just because they were so. Really, there's probably just one episode which is kind of, but overall, this is great season. If you love superheroes and you're ready for a more mature look at it, this is a great one to look at. And I look forward to the fact that there are 2 more seasons coming out, because they did announce that they were renewed for seasons 2 and 3 already.
And I'm sure as long as they continue this level of quality, they're going to go past season 3. Like, there's so much story to tell with Invincible. There, and I'm sure they won't cover every story that they do, but there is a lot to draw from.
Absolutely.
For the series. So, would you care to make the announcement as to what we shall be doing when we are done? Now that we are done with the first season of Invincible.
All right. So now we are going to be doing Star Wars show Obi-Wan.
Super pumped about it. So far, the first 3 episodes have come out. As of the recording of this episode of our podcast, only 3 episodes are out. I think it's safe to say we've both enjoyed the show so far.
Mm-hmm.
Super excited to go to see where the show goes. And anytime that they get to, so I'm super pumped for it. And Ewan McGregor is such a phenomenal Obi-Wan Kenobi. So any opportunity to see him do more Obi-Wan, I'm down for it. I'm so
Absolutely.
there. So yeah, super excited to do that for you, to do with that with you guys. So just in closing, anybody, if you guys have any questions for us about the biblical lessons that we do, or anything that we've talked about in this episode, or if you guys have questions about anything, you want to talk to us about anime, comics, anything in general,
Get your Star Wars questions ready.
Get your Star Wars questions ready. Like we've talked about previously when we did our review of Star Wars: A New Hope. Star Wars was my brother and I's very first thing that we were truly fanatical about. So we have a deep love for everything Star Wars. So please reach out to us. You can email us at frickityfracktalkback@gmail.com, or reach out to us on Twitter at frickityf or at frickityfrack on Instagram and Facebook. So One last time, we need to put some pants on and get into the sky.